Hello, everyone. Welcome to Take Charge of Your Health and to our second weekend of Mental Health Month. Greetings from Australia to those who are joining us from different parts of the world. Say hi, type your comments and questions in the chat box on YouTube, as we will have a Q&A segment at the end of the presentation. If you would like to ask an anonymous question, please let me know and your name will not be mentioned. We believe it is God's will for His children to learn how to care for their bodies mentally, physically, and spiritually. And as we have learned so far, these are closely connected, and our physical health greatly depends on the health of our mind. Our guest today is Dr. Mark Sandoval, and he will cover the key to victory in 2 sessions. The topic will focus on how to overcome personal struggles and gain progressive victories in our lives. He will also share his personal testimony. Again, reminding everyone that any additional information about Dr. Sandoval's ministry and Take Charge of Your Health can be found in the description box. So, Dr. Mark Sandoval is a medical doctor and the co-founder of New Paradigm Ministries. He is medical director of UG Pines Institute. Dr. Sandoval is board certified in emergency medicine and lifestyle medicine, but he has practiced lifestyle medicine and natural remedies exclusively for the last decade. He is also a biblical counselor, which is the focus of his ministry and practice at this time. Welcome to the program, Dr. Sandoval. Thank you so much for being here today.
It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. It's a blessing. So I had a little short bio about you, but would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself, what you do, and what you are currently busy with?
Sure. Yes, I have the privilege of spending a lot of time with individuals and doing individual counseling at the moment. But that wasn't where I began. In fact, if you would have told me about 15 years ago, this is where I was at, I would be a bit surprised at it and what the journey has been. I had wanted to do medicine ever since I was in high school and pursued that career and finished medical school at Loma Linda University and then did training in emergency medicine. That was the first part of my career. So gunshot wounds and trauma and car accidents and all sorts of things in the emergency department. And that was exciting. And there was a component of, it was rewarding as well. And then I went to the mission field and I was the director of emergency medicine and family practice on the island of Trinidad, one of the hospitals there. And it was while I was there that I became more interested in natural remedies, lifestyle interventions, and recognizing that I needed to be able to do more for my patients. They would come in and especially as I also had a family practice, I would see the patients again and again, and they had the same problems. And I was supposed to give them medication, and and I would, and they came back with the same problem, and then the problem was just getting worse, and I was just adding medications to their, to their daily routine, and realized this is not working, and this is not why I went into medicine. They need to be better. And so I recognized that I needed to educate rather than medicate. And so that transition began where I started looking at, education and started learning for myself about health. I actually began with a radio program that wanted the hospital that I was working at to do health programming for the community. And that really forced me to start learning about health. And so I started reading about nutrition and exercise and all of these different lifestyle factors, and then presenting those in a radio program. And I was nervous as could be, scared to death, but it worked out okay. And then I began to launch more and more looking at lifestyle. And
Mhm.
I decided to transition full time to lifestyle. And so I moved to Uchee Pines Institute in Alabama, a lifestyle center that's been around since 1970. The Institute has been around. I think the first center was actually built around 76 or 78, and went to learn from Dr. Agatha Thrash, who was one of the leading physicians in non drug therapies at the time, and learned how to use hydrotherapy and herbs and lifestyle interventions and these natural remedies in order to help individuals to reverse their diseases, get off their medications, and really saw some amazing transformations that happened during my time there at UT Pines. In fact, I went for a year and I ended up staying for almost 10. And for a good portion of that, I was the president and medical director of the Institute, and learned so much about helping to take care of individuals from a natural standpoint. But one thing that I found while I was there was that individuals, there's a reason that they have the lifestyle that they do. It's true that there are symptoms that individuals manifest, and those symptoms are the effect, but they're not the cause. If we want to understand the cause, then we have to get deeper than that. And, then we look at an individual's behaviors, and their behaviors that has a significant impact. As I picture it, the symptoms are like the leaves on a tree. There's tons and tons of leaves on a tree, and there are tons and tons of symptoms that an individual can have. But those leaves on the tree grow off of the branches, and the branches represent our behaviors. You can have good behaviors, you can have bad behaviors. If you have good behaviors, a good branch, then you're going to have good leaves and good fruit on those branches. But if you have bad behaviors, then you're going to end up with bad fruit and bad leaves on those branches. And so when I went into lifestyle, then we were dealing with a lot of the behaviors rather than just the symptoms. So we were getting deeper. But the branches don't grow by themselves. They grow off of the trunk, and the trunk represents our needs. We need oxygen, we need water, we need food, we need sunlight, we need activity, and so on. And there's various different needs that we have. And the needs don't change. You can't change the fact that you need oxygen. I mean, you always need oxygen. You can decide that you don't need it, but that you're going to find out really fast that you still do. And so we can't change our needs, but if our behaviors match our needs so that we supply that which we need, then we're going to have health. But the trunk doesn't grow by itself. The trunk grows from the roots, and the roots represent our beliefs. So, really, what somebody does is a reflection of what they believe. And so I began to recognize as time went on and I was practicing and helping, many different patients, that really the issues are here. The issues that
Mhm.
individuals are dealing with are in the mind. It's really what an individual believes that drives what they do. And and so that began a quest to understand better how to help individuals from a mind standpoint. And I'm not professionally trained in psychiatry. I'm not trained in psychology. Um, my training is really sitting across from an individual and then praying really hard and saying, okay, Lord, you know what's wrong with it with this person. I don't know what's wrong with them. You got to help me. You know,
Mhm.
you've got to help me to understand how to understand their situation, how to approach that situation, and to help me um, to be able to say something that is helpful for them or help them to say something that I recognize. And I can't tell you how often that I would be sitting with a patient and I would be talking with them and I'd be praying while I'm talking. I'm talking to
Mhm.
them and I'm praying to God and saying, okay, help me. And I would tell them something, and those words would come right around, hit me in the ear. And then I'd be like, oh, that's cool. I never thought of that before. But I just said it, right? I just said it, but I never thought of that before. And so there were so
Mhm.
many times where that happened where God gave me, just the words to say and a little bit of insight into this individual's case. And those became tools that I had to be able to use in helping other individuals in the future. And so that just continued to grow. I began to understand more and more about how the mind operates and how that relates to the body and its function. And so eventually I got to the point where I recognized that what I was learning, I really needed to focus on exclusively. And so last year, we transitioned away from UT Pines Institute. We started a new ministry called New Paradigm Ministries. And New Paradigm Ministries really is focusing on primarily helping with the mental health challenges of individuals. But we're still dealing with, natural remedies and helping individuals with their health challenges as well. And having a wonderful time and being able to help individuals through biblical principles to find freedom from the challenges that they are struggling with. And we look at, as a ministry, looking at helping people to find life out of their, from their bondage. And life stands for living, improving relationships, finding purpose, and experiencing health, right? And so, yes, we're looking at living free, improving relationships, finding uh, purpose, and experiencing health. And those are the areas that we're looking at focusing upon. And, today or this evening, for your viewers, I was thinking of, we're looking at the key to victory, and really, I want to focus on my testimony tomorrow. I'm going to look at focusing on that testimony tomorrow, and today talking about basic principles of the mind and how that impacts an individual's health. Um, First of all, looking at some case studies of individuals. I think that would be helpful for us. It's always encouraging to have different stories. One of those cases I'll call Reggie. Reggie is an individual who I came to know. His wife had come to our lifestyle center for a particular condition, and he was there, kind of assisting with her care while she was there. And I was presenting one day about how we can be free from the past, and how that freedom from the past can come about, because so many people are burdened with guilt, they're burdened with resentment or bitterness. They have been treated in a negative way, and um, that and then they have responded to that in a negative way, or they have done things in the past that they regret and they have guilt related to it. And I can't tell you how many patients that I have taken care of that their 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 autoimmune disease, their cancer, their health condition has come because of these past issues that they haven't been able to find freedom from. And so we were presenting about that, and he really latched on. And I do have a book that I wrote called The Law of Life, and it's available on Amazon. And anyway, so he got the book and started reading it. And then they started doing book studies. They would have groups get together on Zoom, and they would go through the book and talk about the principles and practical applications and other things like that. And I think he had done probably 3 rounds of this with different individuals going through the book. And then he realized that there was an issue that he had had with a coworker from years past that hadn't really been resolved. And that was something that the Lord impressed upon his mind. And so he realized that he really needed to be free from these issues. And he, going through that chapter in the book about having freedom from the past, he really looked at applying those principles in his own life. And then he he did, and he applied those principles. He found that freedom with the Lord, and then I think he had a conversation with the individual as well in regards to that. And he had been struggling with ulcerative colitis for the last 3 to 4 years. and that's an autoimmune condition that attacks the bowel and essentially destroys the colon from the last part of the colon and then progressively to the first part of the colon. And it's associated with, bloating and diarrhea and bleeding and lots of pain, and then it can result in cancer. Um, and so usually in ulcerative colitis, the final step, you try immune modulating medications, steroids, other things like that. And the last step is usually just to remove the colon. And anyways, his ulcerative colitis went away. Hadn't had any problems with ulcerative colitis since that time. And so interestingly, his resentment and thought processes related to that coworker, when he resolved those issues, then his ulcerative colitis went away. Well, Michelle was another patient that I took care of, and she came in with ovarian cancer, and she had 11 tumors in the abdomen, and she had tried chemotherapy twice. Each time the tumors were getting bigger. So she ended up coming to UT Pines, and of course we did the usual stuff, put her on a whole food plant-based diet and a progressive exercise routine, i.e. walking, having her out in the fresh air and sunshine, did hydrotherapy treatments with her, put her on some herbs and so on. And by the end of the session, her cancer markers had come back into the normal range. But another thing we did as well is I found out that she had she never knew who her father was. Her mother was kind of a party girl and to kind of drugs and alcohol, and had left her with the grandparents. And there was a lot of resentment related to the mother. And so we started working on that and dealing with those resentment issues, and encouraging her to come and resolve those. Come to God, take all the love that you need, that you can love your mother with, and let her be free, because love doesn't control. Love provides freedom. Let her be free. Come to God and have Him as your only source, and He's a good source, and so you can get the good that you need. And so she did that. And a couple months later, her scans showed that half of the tumors were gone and the other half were smaller. And then a couple of months after that, we get the boohoo story. The cancer markers are back up. And come to find out, mom had come back into the picture, and all that resentment and everything had kind of come to the surface again. And so I had another, counseling session with her and helped her to refocus and remember to come back to God, and to trust in Him, and let mom alone, and not take personally the stuff that she did to her, because that was her mom's issue, not her issue, and she doesn't have to make it her own. And she did. And again later, cancer's gone. Right. So you could see the direct correlation between her cancer and its growth and regression based upon how her thought processes are going. And so that shows us that there's a very strong correlation between the mind and what's going on in the mind and the body. Now, I tell individuals it's not the event that happened. There's a lot of times there's bad things that have happened to us that then is the trigger, and then we end up having health challenges later. Well, it's not the bad thing that happened. It's the thought processes associated with that become prominent at the time, that are carried on then through time and end up being the thing that is destructive to the body. Um, the research shows that close to 90% of the time, when an individual goes to a physician for some kind of health complaint, that is associated with a mental health challenge that the individual has, whether that's depression or anxiety, or some other challenge. I put it in the terms of negative thoughts. When an individual is struggling with negative thoughts, then that has a negative impact on the body. And the question is, what are negative thoughts? Well, negative thoughts are thoughts that are out of harmony with the truth. Right? So it is a belief in lies or error as if it's the truth, and then responding to that belief in lies or error uh, in a way that will manifest itself in your words and your actions and your responses, and that has a negative impact upon the body. We were created in God's image, and God is the author of truth. And when the foundation of our thinking is based upon the truth, then that is how our minds were created to control the body. Everything in the body is controlled through the mind, right? Everything in the body is controlled through the mind. And and I mean, your blood pressure is controlled through the mind. Your heart rate is controlled through the mind, although it has its intrinsic rate, but then it can increase or decrease based upon the mind's input. You have fluid volume, electrolyte levels, pH balance, organ system functions, and so on. It's all there, and it's all regulated through the mind. And and so that mind was created to control all of these functions of the body very well under the influence of the truth. But when that mind is then under the influence of lies or error, the mind was not created to control the functions of the body under that influence of error. And so when we believe error, then that has a very significant impact upon the body and how the body functions. And that can result in all sorts of disease and manifestations. Now, those manifestations can be localized in a certain spot, or they can be something that's more generalized. We've probably all had the experience where we have been in a fearful situation, a situation where we have had fear, and then you had a fear response or a stress response in that situation. For example, like if you're walking and a big dog starts chasing you, or you're outside in the dark and something starts rustling in the leaves in the trees nearby, and it starts coming in your direction. There might be a fear response from that, and with that fear response, we have various different physiologic changes that happen in our body. Your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, the liver starts breaking down glycogen into glucose, and the sugars dumped into the bloodstream. Your blood lipids go up. Your blood clotting factors go up. Your pupils dilate. Your muscles get more tense. You get more blood flow going to your muscles and your brain. You get less bladder tension, so bladder relaxes. Your digestion slows down or stops. Blood flow to the skin decreases, and so on. So you have this what we call fight or flight response, and that's generalized. I mean, that's the whole body, and that can happen in just milliseconds from a thought to this whole process going on in the body. And so you can have a generalized response, but most individuals don't recognize that you can have a very localized response, because the brain, the physical structure of the brain, and the nervous system and its interaction with the body is very specific. For example, if you want to control your left toes, well, you're going to do that in the right side of the brain because the fibers cross. So the right side of the brain controls the right side of the face, but it controls the left side of the body, and vice versa. The left side of the brain controls the left side of the face and the right side of the body. So if you want to control your left toes, that controls on the right side of the brain, but it's not just anywhere on the right side of the brain. It's the upper inner portion of the right side of the brain that controls the left toes. And the sensation from the toes come up into that similar area just a little bit more forward. And if you want to control your tongue, well, that's going to be up more in the upper outer portion of the brain. If you control your fingers and so on. So there's specific locations where each of the different parts of the body are controlled as far as their functions are concerned. And each part of the body where information is brought by the nerves to the cortex of the brain, so that we can know where something happened. For example, if your eyes are closed and somebody's pin the tail on the donkey, and you happen to be the donkey and they pin it on you somewhere, you know where that pin went because there's that very regulated connection to various different parts of the body. And so you can have a thought or a thought process that initiates in a certain portion of the cortex, and that will have an effect in a certain part of the body. Let's just take a very common example of coronary artery disease. So, an individual develops a plaque in one of the arteries that supplies the muscle of the heart. And if you've ever been in cardiology, I've done cardiology rotations, and you go and you watch them do um, a cardiac catheterization where they put a catheter in, they shoot some dye into those arteries, they take x-rays and take a look and see if there's blockages. Well, it's usually not the whole artery that's blocked. You'll have certain spots that are particularly blocked. Well, why is it that spot or the other spot? It's not just the cholesterol, because the cholesterol has the same concentration before you get to that spot as at that spot versus after that spot. So if it was just the cholesterol, well, then that whole tube should be lined up, and there should be a lot of cholesterol in the edges of that tube all the way through. But that's not what you see. You see that a good portion of that tube, the artery, is open, and then you get to a certain spot, and boom, oh, it closes up, and it's got a bunch of cholesterol in that place. It's called a plaque, and then it opens up again, and then it continues going. Well, why is it that spot, right? And one of the common theories out there is that there's particular trauma that happened at that area, and it sets up a process of inflammation. And that inflammatory process, along with white blood cells that have extra cholesterol in them, then work together in order to form that cholesterol plaque at that area. But really, if it's trauma, then the trauma should resolve itself fairly shortly, heal, and be done with it. But this is an inflammatory process that continues for years, and while you have this development of plaque. Well, what's another explanation? Well, another explanation is you have a nerve ending that goes to that spot in that artery. And that nerve ending is connected through various different nerve connections to a particular spot in the brain. And if you have a signal that is coming from that particular spot in the brain, then that can end up with neurotransmitters that are released from the end of that neuron, and the end of that nerve in that particular spot in the body. And the nervous system is the primary controller of the immune system. So then you have chemicals that are released by that nerve in that area that are picked up by the white blood cells. The white blood cells, when they get that signal coming by that area, go out, check out what's going on in the wall of the artery. And some of them, if you've got extra cholesterol around, then those white blood cells might have that extra cholesterol in them. And then when they die in that area, they leave the cholesterol behind and the plaque develops and grows. And there's, other things you think about. Gout. Gout is a painful, inflammatory arthritis, usually happens in the foot, and usually on one foot. Sometimes it can be both feet, and it's usually in the big toe, the base of the big toe, the most common place that it happens. And we recognize that it's associated with uric acid. And then you can take a medication like allopurinol, and when that medication gets the uric acid levels low enough, then the gout goes away. And so most people think that it's just related to uric acid. But where's the uric acid elevated? If you had gout and I sent you to the lab, what would they do? Well, they wouldn't draw blood from your toe, they'd draw blood from your hand or from your arm. Right? And why can they do that? Because any substance that gets into the bloodstream gets mixed into an even concentration and then circulates throughout. So it doesn't matter if I get the blood from your left hand, or if I get it from your right hand or your left arm, or from your right arm, or if I get it from your neck, or if I get it from your groin, or if I get it from your feet. It doesn't matter where I get the blood from. I have an idea of what that chemical level is throughout all of your bloodstream. So the same amount of uric acid was going to your left foot as was going to your right foot. But a lot of people end up with with the gout just in one side. So can it be the uric acid? And the answer is no. It's like walking down the beach. If you walk down the beach and you see a sandcastle, nobody concludes that the sand made the sandcastle. Now, you can't have a sandcastle without the sand, but neither can you have a sandcastle without a builder. So you have to have a sandcastle builder. And so if we just look at it from a chemical standpoint, yes, gout doesn't happen if you don't have uric acid, but everybody has uric acid. And I've seen individuals with horrible gout with normal uric acid levels. And I've seen other individuals with very high uric acid levels and no gout whatsoever. And so the question is, what is it that causes the gout? It's not the uric acid. Now, you have to have the uric acid to cause the gout. And if you take the uric acid away, the gout goes away. But what's the builder? Right? What is the thing that builds it? Well, you have a nerve again, and if it's your left great toe, then you have a spot in the upper inner right portion of the brain that is connected to that area in that joint. And that signal can be sent down to that toe. And with that signal, it involves the immune system. The immune system is what generally is involved in, inflammation. So any inflammatory process involves the immune system. And the vast majority of those involve the nervous system as well. But, anyways, you have the immune system and you have the living cells around the joint, and they can pull in the uric acid and they can concentrate it and then they can spit it out into that joint so that the uric acid concentration increases and increases in that joint until it finally crystallizes. Then it forms these nice pokey crystals, and those can poke into the joint. You have inflammation and pain and swelling, and wow, you have gout. And so, what most people do not see, and most physicians don't see it, is that there is some kind of mental issue behind the development of the gout. And if we only deal with the chemical components of it, and by medication and so on, try to take away or reduce the uric acid levels, but we don't deal with the mental issue that's behind it, well, then we have done our patients a disservice because we haven't really gotten to the cause. And and I don't blame any physicians for not going there for several reasons. One, they don't know, right? We aren't taught this in medical school. I didn't learn these things in medical school. This is stuff that I learned afterwards. So we're not taught these associations. Plus, also, physicians just don't have time. The system is set up so that a physician doesn't have enough time to sit down with a patient to really find out what's going on in their life and to discover the the relationship challenges, the thought processes, and so on that an individual has behind those manifestations. And so they don't have time, they haven't taught this, and so most just don't know. They don't even realize it's you mention this kind of stuff, like if there's physicians watching this, they're going to be looking at it and going, what, really? Yeah, I mean, it's uric acid, and we just use allopurinol or other medications to help out with it, and anti-inflammatories. Well, yes, you can take away the sandcastle by using chemicals. You can pour water all over the sandcastle and then the sandcastle goes away. But you haven't taken care of the sandcastle builder. And that's the real issue. And if you take care of the sandcastle builder, you don't have to worry about adding those extra chemicals and the extra medications and so on later on. And so it's something that's there, and it's something that's very powerful, and we must recognize it. The mind has a very significant impact upon the body, and it's true that about 90% of the time an individual's disease and an individual's health challenges are related to their mind and what they're thinking. Now, what is it that is associated with those mind issues that end up being a big problem to people? Well, of course, we know about stress, right? That's one of the areas that we recognize that that people have problems, and the question is, what is stress, right? Well, stress is trying to control what you can't control and failing at doing so. That's what stress is. Stress is trying to control what you cannot control and failing at controlling it. And what are things that you can't control? Well, you can't control space. You can't control time. You can't control circumstances. You can't control your environment. You can't control resources, finances, and so on. You can't control possessions. You can't control people, right? But as long as you're trying to control those things, you're going to fail at doing so. And the response to failing at doing so is going to be stress. Why is it that we would control all of those things? Why would we try to control environment and circumstances and people and animals and space and time and so on? Who is it that controls all of those things? Well, those are not under our control, those are under God's control. So the moment that we try to control space and time and circumstances and resources, environment and possessions and people and so on, the moment that we try to step into that realm and control those things, well, we're stepping into God's territory, trying to do what only God can do, and that gets stressful. Why do we do that? Well, we do that because we believe that we're God. Hmm. That's the fundamental deception of humanity. It came from back in the Garden of Eden when Eve was tempted by the serpent, and the serpent said, "Has God indeed said you should not eat of every tree of the garden?" And the woman went on the defensive, and she says, "Well, no, we can eat every tree of the garden except for this one." And the serpent said, "Well, you know what? Eh, I mean, I ate from this tree months ago, and I'm not dead. In fact, I got powers that I didn't even know about. I can speak and I can reason and I can do all this kind of stuff, and God knows you're not going to die." And that good is outside of what God gave you, right? What He prohibited is actually good, and what He gave you is not as good as what He withheld from you. And God knows in the day that you eat of it, you will not die, but you will be like God, knowing good and evil. And so Eve latched onto that. She believed the enemy. Adam believed her too. And so both of them fell into the sinful condition. And every one of us have been born to Adam and Eve since that time. And that lie has been perpetuated to all of us. What's the foundational lie that goes behind it all? Well, the foundational lie that goes behind it all is that I'm God. And and it's not a conscious thought. It's not. It's an unconscious thought. But how does it manifest itself? Well, if I'm God, then I am my own. Right? If I'm God, then I'm my own. And so what is done to me, and I have responsibility for myself, accountability only to myself, and so on. And if I'm God, then I have a particular type of love. Mine is a selfish love, right? Because in order to enter into this, I have to detach from God, and then I don't have His unselfish love, and so my love is giving in order to receive. That's everybody's love in the context of believing that we're God. We give in order to receive. So it seems generous, but all of my giving is for the sake that I might receive. So, for example, when you tell somebody I love you, does I love you mean I love you? Or does I love you mean I want you to love me? Is it a statement of fact or is it a request? And, I ask audiences this all the time when I go travel and speaking. And they, I ask them, is I love you a statement of fact or is it a request? And a lot of people will say that it's a request, and some people will say that it's a statement of fact. And so then I ask them this question. Well, okay, if it's a fact that you love them, then if you tell your loved one I love you, and they say, okay, and then you tell them I love you, and they say, well, whatever. And then you say, I love you. And they say, well, that's your problem. And if they say, I love you, you say, well, you got to get your head checked. I love you. I don't love you. And every time you tell them I love you, they respond in some negative way like that, not acknowledging it, not believing it that it's true, stating that they don't love you in return, and so on. How long are you going to say I love you? Well, the vast majority of individuals are going to stop saying I love you pretty quickly. Why? Because I love you is a fishing trip, right? It is a request for I love you too. And if I don't get the I love you too, then I'm going to stop fishing in that way. I'm going to look for some other way to try to get the I love you, the love that I need from somebody else. And so it ends up being very empty and very selfish. So the love in this context of I am God and in sinful fallen human nature, that love gives, but it gives with an expectation of return. And if I don't get what I expect in return, now life is not good for me. So you love somebody and you want to give them the perfect present, and you go looking for it and you find the perfect present, and you save for a few months in order to get it, and then the day comes to give the present. It's an anniversary, birthday, Christmas, something, I don't know, and so you come and you bring that gift, and you knock on the door, and they open the door, and with a smile you hand them the gift, and they take the gift and they throw it on the ground, they stomp on it, and they slam the door. Now, how do you feel? Do you take that personally? Well, yeah. I mean, we take it personally. We're hurt, we're upset, we're angry, we're we're crushed, or we feel rejected, and so on. These are different ways that people feel in that scenario. But why? Why do we feel that way? Well, because we believe that the gift has come from me. It represents my love. And that was my money that purchased it, and that was my loved one. And so when they treat it that way, then I feel rejected. It's personal, right? Because it's about me. But what if you were working for the parcel service, whatever your parcel service is, DHL, or in the United States we have FedEx and UPS and whatever, so you have a carrier, you're going around taking packages from place to place. And so you stop at a particular residence, get the package for the home, you go up to the door, you knock on the door, and the resident of the home comes out. You have them sign for the package, they sign for it. You hand them the package, they take the package, they throw it on the ground, they stomp on it, and they slam the door. Now, how do you feel? Well, you might be curious, might be cautious, but you're not angry, you're not frustrated at them, you're not upset, you don't take it personal, you're not feeling crushed or rejected or other things like that. Why? Because it's not yours, right? And not your present. It wasn't purchased with your money, it doesn't represent your love, and that's not your loved one. So, to the degree to which it's not yours is the degree to which you will not take it personal when something like that happens. But when you believe that it is yours, then you will take it personal. And when is it that you believe that it's yours? You believe that it's yours when you're God. You believe that it's yours when you're God because God is the owner. So if I believe that I'm God, then I'm the owner. So therefore, it's mine. And if it's broken, if it's damaged, if it's stolen, if it walks away, then it's my loss. So as God, it's mine, and now it's my loss. I can't tell you how many people that I have dealt with that their sickness came after a significant loss. They lost a loved one. They lost a career. They lost reputation. Something of that nature was lost. Right, a significant loss, and they've taken it personal, and now the disease process happens. Now, if I'm God, I'm also dependent upon others. I I need them, right? Says I'm still dependent. God created me dependent. I have to have oxygen. I have to have water. I have to have food. I have to have air. I have to. There are things that I need, and I need love too. But what kind of love do I need? I need love that is full. I need love that is constant. I need love that is personal. I need love that's unselfish. That's the kind of love that I need. And that's the love that God has. And so he created us that we might be connected to him and that we might take all of that love that we need, that we might be full. But the moment sin comes in and we cut ourselves off from God by believing that we're our own God, which is what happened with Eve and Adam, and then you and I, we don't necessarily cut ourselves off from there. We're born in that state. And but if we cut ourselves off from God, well, we're still dependent. We still need still need love from somewhere, and we still need our resources from somewhere. And so when we cut ourselves off from God, we then come and attach ourselves to others. So after the fall, Adam saw Eve as his source, and Eve saw Adam as her source. And so they started leeching on each other. And that's what we do too. We depend upon others. And so then we become a slave to them. Why? Because we see that what they have, we need, and because we see that what they have we need, we bind ourselves to them so that we can get that thing that we need from them. We need their acceptance. We need to feel belonged, to have companionship with them. We need them for yes, for belonging. We need to get along well with them. We need actually them to get along well with us. We need them to understand us. We need them to accept us, and so on, right? So we see that others have what we need, and so we bind ourselves to them in order to get what we need from them. And yes, we'll give with the expectation of receiving back again from them. And so we see them as our source, so we're dependent upon them. And guess what? Well, then now they can control us. If you are dependent upon someone or something, then that someone or that something can control you. It can control you, right? They can control you with nice things in order to get nice things back from you, or they can control you with threats, and abuse and other things like that, because fear is a powerful motivator. But everyone who threats or abuses someone else is a slave to the one that they threaten and they abuse, because they see that one as their source and they're trying to keep them as their source. So there's a lot of manipulation that goes into this as well. And so, and you can't get out of it as long as you believe that you need what they have. And if I'm God, then I expect good from others, right? Because we were created for good, right? And God created us for good, not for evil. He only created us for good. That's why the tree of knowledge of good and evil was a problem, because He didn't create us for any evil, only good. And so it is good to expect good from your source, because God created Himself, He created us that He might be our only source. And so, yes, we should expect good. But now, when we cut ourselves off from God and we look to others and they are cut off from God, can we expect that good from them? I mean, have you ever met somebody that had a love for you that was full and constant and personal and unselfish? No, you've never met that in another person. Now, if you expect that from another person, you're going to be very disappointed. And if you expect it from the next person and the next person and the next person, you're just going to go through life disappointed, 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 because no human being can supply that need for you. But if I cut myself off from God and I am dependent upon others to get what I need, and I need that kind of love, then I'm going to go to them to get that kind of love. And when it doesn't work out, then I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated. And it's very easy for them to manipulate me, and I try to manipulate them in return. And so there's all this control, there's all this manipulation, but when I enter into somebody else's sphere of action, they resist that. And when somebody else enters into my sphere of action, I resist that as well. And so that results in conflict and damaged relationships. And if I'm God, then it's about me. I'm my own, so it's about me. So what somebody else says, what they do, how they say it, how they do it, I take it personal as if it's about me. But what comes out of another person comes out of them because that's what's in them. Like, what's in the bottle? Well, the the only thing that can come out of the bottle, I mean, if I knock it over, boom, all right, well, stuff can come spilling out after I knock it over. But what can come spilling out is only what was in there. If there wasn't anything in there, nothing could come spilling out, right? So it doesn't matter what knocks the bottle over. What comes out of the bottle comes out because that's what's in there. And it's true for humans too. What comes out of a person comes out of them because that's what was in them. It can't come out otherwise. So it doesn't matter what your circumstances are. It doesn't matter what your situations are. It doesn't matter how much sleep you got. It doesn't matter what the other person said, what they did, how they said it, how they did it. What comes out of you comes out of you because that's what's in you. But if you blame what comes out of you upon what was around you, about your circumstances or your situations, or the other people around you and what they said and what they did, if you blame what comes out of you on them, you will never learn your lesson. And you will never be able to overcome. You'll always be a slave. It's only when we realize that how we respond is because of what is in us, not because of what they said and what they did. I mean, look at the life of Jesus. There was all sorts of evil that was done to Jesus, and he never responded in an evil way. He always responded to evil with good. Why? Because he never had any evil inside to come spilling out. It's not like he had to, it was there teeming, welling up, and he had to put the gates on it and try to keep it from coming out. And he did really good throughout his whole life of keeping it from coming out. No, he didn't have the evil there in the first place. So it didn't matter what happened to him, it was only good that came out. You and I, we got evil bubbling all over the place, and we try to hold it in. But when the situations come that knock our bottle over, we can't help it. We come spilling out. Right? And truly, when things are going well, You can selfishness can look just like unselfishness. Disrespect can look very respectful. Dishonor can look very honorable when everything is going well. But when everything goes, that's when what's inside really comes spilling out, and you can't help it. And so it's in those circumstances what comes spilling out of you is a true reflection of what's inside of you. And that's something that we need to recognize, and many people don't recognize. And so, therefore, they can never recover, they can never get better because they blame everything around them for their own spilling out. Now, again, if I think that I'm God and you spill out around me, then I think your spilling out is about me. And so I take it personal. And so I get personally offended by what you say and what you do and how you say it and how you do it, rather than recognizing that what you say and what you do is about you. It's not about me, even if it's directed in my direction. Jesus never took personally what others said and did. In John chapter 2 says that he would not entrust himself to men because he knew what was in a man. Right? He never entrusted himself to them. He only had his Father as his source. He didn't have other people as a source. And so no one else could ever manipulate him. No one else could ever control him. He didn't take personally what anybody else said and did to him. He only took from his Father. And his Father said, "This is my Son whom I love. With him I am well pleased." So when the religious leaders were calling him Beelzebub, the prince of demons, and he's a Samaritan and a sinner, and he hangs around with prostitutes and tax collectors, and so he must be a prostitute, a pimp, and and whatever, right? And they were making all these accusations. Jesus didn't. He wasn't like, oh, I can't believe they're saying this about me. Oh. No, he wasn't. He didn't have any self pity. You know what I'm saying? He didn't have anything to pity in himself. He pitied them. Right? Because here he is, God and human flesh, and he's the Messiah, and they're tearing him down. How horrible of a deception they must be in, and how horrible the inside of their lives must be in order for them to speak like this. No, he felt sorry for them. He pitied them. He didn't feel sorry for himself. And then again, if I'm God, then I'm the owner. I own the stuff. It belongs to me. And so if the car is damaged, it's my car, it's my loss. If the house burns down, that was my house, that's my loss. If my spouse leaves me, that was my spouse, so it's my loss. If my mother dies, then that was my mother, and it's my loss. And if I'm injured and I lose, paralyzed from the waist down, then that's my injury and that's my loss. But really, is it? No, I'm not God, and I'm not my own. Everything belongs to Him. He's the owner. It's not my body. It's not my stuff. He's the owner of everything. That I don't nothing belongs to me. Things are only given to me as a steward. And every stewardship has a beginning and every stewardship has an end in this life. I might have my parents at the beginning, but I'm not going to have them at the end. I don't have my children at the beginning, and when I die, I'm not going to be able to take them with me. I have a car, but I didn't have it forever. I got it at some point, and I'm not gonna have it at some point. And the house came at some point, and I'm not gonna have it at some point. Every stewardship that God gives to us is always temporary, it always has a beginning, and it always has an end. But if I think it's mine, then I want it forever. And when the end comes, I see it as my loss, and so I mourn my own loss, selfish mourning, right? I don't see it as belonging to God, and it's time for the stewardship to be over. And praise God for the time that He gave. And if I'm God, then it's my problem. It's my problem. Then I've got to fix it. I've got to try to control things. I've got to try to make sure that it works out well and has a good outcome. But I can't control all the other things around me. So I can't. You and I are not responsible for the outcome. You and I are not responsible for success. We are only responsible for, Lord, what would you have me to do right now? And then doing what the Lord shows us, what He indicates. That's our only responsibility. How that turns out, that is God's responsibility. We are never responsible for reputation. We are only responsible for influence. Reputation is what others think of me. Influence is what I say and what I do. So I only have responsibility for what I say and what I do. I have no responsibility for how someone else takes that, whether they are my child, whether they are a close relative, whether they're a friend, whether they're an acquaintance, or whether they're somebody I don't even know. I have no responsibility for what someone else thinks, what they say, what they do. I only have a responsibility for what I think and what I say and what I do. And finally, if I'm God, then I'm the judge, and I'm a cruel judge. And so I'm oppressive towards others. And so I'm not forgiving. So if they do evil to me, then I hold on to resentment and bitterness because of that for years. Because there's only one place and one way that you can let it go, and that's at the cross by faith. But I will hold on to resentment and bitterness, but I will also condemn myself. I will think that I should have been able to, do this better. I shouldn't have fallen here, and so on. And so I hold myself in guilt and self hatred and other things of that nature, and I just beat myself down. Well, that's not what God wants for us. He wants to set us free, right? He wants to help us to realize that our true identity is that we're a child of God. And if I'm a child of God, then I'm not my own. And my love is not giving in order to receive. My love is taking from Him everything that I need and then giving away to others freely out of my fullness. Right? You can't give honor if you don't have honor. You can't give love if you don't have love. You can't give respect if you don't have respect. So you've got to come first and take from God that you might have that respect, that honor, that love, and only then can you give it away to others. And so we must come first and take that which we need from God. Then we can give it away to others. Then we're free to do so. And if I'm a child of God, then I'm dependent upon Him. He's my source. He has everything that I need. And I come to Him and I rely upon Him and His words to me. And, just like He said to Jesus, this is my son, this is my child whom I love. With him I am well pleased, or her that I'm well pleased. Then He says that to me. And so I can live confident just like Jesus lived confident, regardless of what others say around me, because I know the Father loves me and He's well pleased with me because I am in Christ. And in Christ, I get everything that the life of Christ was. And so I'm free from others. And if I'm a child of God, then I expect good from God, and He has all the good that I need, so I'm content. And if I'm a child of God, it's not about me. Right? It's not about me. It's not personal. What others say and what they do, that's about them. Even if it's attacks of the enemy, it's just a reflection of who the enemy is and what he's like. It's not personal. It's not about me. And if it's an attack from the enemy, he could care less about me. He's trying to get at God. And so it's really not personal. If you had somebody that didn't like you and they went and they keyed your car, got that key and scraped down the side of the car. Well, yes, the offense might be done to the car, but it's not about the car. It's about you. They're trying to get at you. If you had sold that car a few years ago and it wasn't your car anymore and you had another car, well, they wouldn't go after that car that you had sold a few years ago. They'd go after the car you have right now. Well, the same thing with the devil. The devil, yes, stuff might be done to you, but it's not about you. The enemy is trying to get at God by getting at you. Right? So it's not personal. And if I'm a child of God, then I'm a steward. It's not mine. There is nothing that I can lose if I have the right perspective. Besides that, God says that we should have treasures in heaven and not on earth. Why? Because the treasures on earth we can lose. If you have ever lost your treasure, you had the wrong treasure. If you've ever lost your treasure, you had the wrong treasure. It was in the wrong place. Because the true treasure you can never lose. And that's what God wants for us, so that we're a steward. It's not mine. I can't lose it. Then we're free from personal loss. And if I'm a child of God, then it's not my problem. It's God's problem. He's going to have to figure out how to fix it, and He already knows how to fix it. My role and responsibility is simply to come to Him and say, "Okay, Lord, now that you're fixing it, what would you have me to do? Now that you're fixing it, what would you have me to do?" And And if I'm a child of God, then God is the judge. And I can leave others in his hands, and he can bring things about, and he's a compassionate judge. He's the advocate, right? And he can be compassionate with them, and I can be compassionate with them as well. And I can leave myself in God's hands and not condemn myself. And I can come to the advocate as well, the one who died to set me free, who is my judge. And I can come to him and I can freely accept that forgiveness on my behalf and be set free. So God wants to take us from this deception that we're born in, that I'm God with all those consequences, and bring us to the reality that I'm a child of God with all of the beautiful consequences in regards to that. And as He brings us from one to the other, and as the truth comes in to set us free from those things, it changes how we think, it changes how we respond, it changes everything. And that is the basis of the thinking. The I am the child of God. It's not mine. It's not personal. It doesn't belong to me. I have God, and He's a perfect source, and I can come to Him and take everything that I need and be full. And I have love. I'm not lacking love, and so on. When we have that child of God component, that's exactly how He created the mind, so that it would control well the body. And so he wants to bring us back to that perspective. He wants to bring us back to that, so that then the mind can control the body well, and the diseases begin to go away. Now, in that old book, if you don't have it, I recommend you get it. It's called um, the Ministry of Healing. Ministry of Healing. It's an old book from 1905. Wonderful book. And if you don't have it, get it. Interestingly enough, in that book, Ministry of Healing, the majority of the book deals with personal issues and relationships. It does deal with things like, food and other stuff like that, but it deals mostly with relationships and personal issues. Why? Because those are the major issues that we struggle with that impact our health. Anyways, in that book, in page 115, paragraph 2, it says that the gospel, when received in its purity and power, is a cure for the maladies that originated in sin. What's a cure? It's the gospel. But not just the gospel itself, the gospel received. How do we receive the gospel? It's by faith. And received in its purity and its power. So when faith takes a hold of the pureness and the power of the gospel and brings it in, then it's a cure for the maladies that originated in sin. Which maladies originated in sin? Well, all of them did. Bitterness and resentment and relationship struggles and mental health challenges, all of those originated in sin. But what else originated in sin? Well, cancer did, and diabetes, and hypertension, and obesity, and autoimmune disease, and so on. All these originated in sin. So, what's a cure for all of them? The gospel, received by faith in its purity and power. And so, this is why I practice the way that I do. This is why I have transitioned in my practice from ER to lifestyle, and now looking at biblical counseling and so on, because we have to get to the roots of the issues. If we don't get to the roots of the issues, then it's just not going to work the way that we would like it to work. And so I guess I'll kind of wrap up here, and then we can do some, I think, Q&A time.
Sounds good. Amen to all of that, Dr. Sandoval. Really good. And I just love how simple the instructions and how simple the remedies are, like getting to the root cause of things, and I guess not mixing up the roles, not playing God, because that's when we get really disappointed.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, so we encourage everyone, obviously, to type your questions, and Dr. Sandoval is happy to answer them. So we have about half an hour or 25 minutes for those questions. Just a few things that came to mind, obviously, Dr. Sandoval, in testimonies for the church. Also, Ellen White mentions sickness of the mind prevails everywhere. 9/10 of the diseases from which men suffer have their foundation here. So it's pretty much all the diseases. And then she goes on to say, but few realize the power that the mind has over the body. A great deal of the sickness which afflicts humanity has its origin in the mind and can only be cured by restoring the mind to health. And I guess we don't realize that, do we? How
Right.
important the mind is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's we read the comments, but then we don't think about it. We don't put it in its application. And, I mean, nobody thinks about the mind when they're talking about diabetes.
Mm.
They're just thinking food. Right.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
there was even from that standpoint, type 1. I mean, where somebody is insulin dependent, has an insulin pump, and so on. There was a woman who was grandmother, and she had an insulin pump plus also an implantable glucose monitor, so that she got frequent updates on what her glucose was, blood sugar levels were like, and no, she had an implantable glucose monitor, but she didn't have the insulin pump. And anyway, so that monitor was showing moment by moment what her glucose levels were looking like. And when she found out the grandchildren were coming over to visit, because she loved the grandchildren, her blood sugar levels would drop. She would see it.
Mm.
She could see it on the monitor that her blood sugar levels would go down. This is somebody who's not producing insulin; they're insulin dependent, but her blood sugar levels would go down when she realized that the grandchildren were coming over. That was a good thought. That was a gain. That's quite
Mm.
interesting.
It is. And I guess when someone, I've heard this many times before, that, well, they had a good lifestyle, they were plant based and everything, see, they are still sick. And we don't realize that a lot of people are stressed out, they have a lot of anxiety, and that's where you could be doing all the good things with food and lifestyle, but it's not going to go away.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
as long as we're
I have
anxious.
taken care of a number of health ministries leaders or health ministries directors in that very situation. They've been on a plant-based diet, and they've been exercising, they've been doing all these things, they've been following the 8 laws of health, and now they're sick, and how can this happen? And they're distraught because, now how is this going to affect the health message, and what are other people going
Mhm.
to think, and all that kind of stuff, and they're just absolutely confused. How in the world can this be happening? And the reality is that there's other issues, as you mentioned, right? There's mind issue. I mean, not everybody who's a vegan is happy. I mean, there's a lot of angry vegans out there, and I know people that are in plant-based diets and running health programs and other things like that, and their marriages are falling apart, and there's lots of conflict and other things of that nature. Sure, they're eating right and uh, supposedly, and whatever, but other things are falling apart in the background. And if we discredit those things or we don't recognize those other things, then we're just confused.
Hmm. Yeah, that is very true. And I was reading a book. It's actually a little booklet. It's called "Can Attitude Affect Your Health?" And she's actually she has a lifestyle center, and she says that she can see a link between like different types of cancers and like anger and resentment, like they are linked to those specific emotions. So it's just amazing. So what you see, it seems like from what you're saying as well, Dr. Sandoval, is that what we see, like the disease, is only the symptom of our mind, what our mind is doing, right?
And yes, in the vast majority of cases. I mean, there is inheritance, and inheritance. Obviously, you have broken blueprint that's passed on from a prior generation. And when it comes to inheritance, that's passed on when you have a single cell, and then from that single cell, all of the other cells arise. And so the broken blueprint is in every cell, every cell. But the broken blueprint might be in a particular gene or a few genes. And different cells use different genes, But every cell of a particular type will use all of the same genes, right? If it's a particular type of cell, it's going to use all of the same genes. So if it's an inheritance issue, then it has to manifest throughout all cells of a particular type. It can't just be a few cells here amongst that type or a few cells here amongst that type. So if it's inheritance and somebody has colon cancer because of inheritance, then it has to be throughout the colon. It can't be just one spot here that it begins here and then it starts growing. If it's thyroid disease and it's because of inheritance, it's got to be the whole thyroid. It can't be just like a nodule here and a nodule there and so on. So if you have a localized eruption of a problem amongst other cells that are of the same type, it cannot be inheritance, neither can it be chemical. It can't be chemical either, because the chemical, the foods that you eat and the other things that you take into the body get mixed up in a bloodstream. It's in a similar concentration, and then it goes to the body through that similar concentration. And so in order for it to be a localized issue, then the cells themselves have to take it in and concentrate it. And there's got to be something that causes the cells to take it in and concentrate it, which is beyond just the chemical itself. So if it's a localized manifestation within a particular tissue, it can't be a chemical, it can't be inheritance. You're left with either trauma, because trauma can be localized. You know, like you can hit one finger with the hammer, and the other fingers are okay. So it can be trauma, because trauma can be localized, or it can be the mind, because the nerve endings are in specific locations, and so that can be localized as well.
How interesting is that? And you touched on a very important thing as well, Dr. Sandoval, about blaming others for our surroundings, because I do this as well when I'm not in a good mood in the morning. I obviously, relate that to how I didn't have a good sleep and I'm not as patient. But then obviously you mentioned how we blame, others for what we say, and it's so easy to do, but then the problem will not be fixed. And it is very true. And the Bible says as well in Matthew 12:34, for out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And yeah, really good illustration that you did with the water bottle as well. What's inside is what will spill out.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, like about our attitude towards losing things that we think we possess is our own. Do you think that that could also be a good like preparation for the end times and for when we are actually going to lose everything, right? Like how easy would it be for us if we don't really think now that we own what we
Yes.
have?
Yes. No, absolutely. We look at it from the wrong perspective. We look at the end times and the loss of everything from the perspective of, oh no, how horrible is that I'm going to lose everything. But let's turn it around. If we depend upon anything other than God, then we're in trouble. If we depend upon anything other than God, then we're in trouble. Because everything other than God will fail us. And so, what God in His mercy is going to do is He is going to, and He's trying to do it with us now consciously and slowly, but a time will come when it's rapid and it comes because of external circumstances as well, is He is trying to separate us from every other dependency that we have so that we're dependent upon Him alone. And so imagine what it would be like when you finally come to the place where you are no longer dependent upon people, you are no longer dependent upon possessions, you are no longer dependent upon a job for your livelihood, you're not dependent upon anything else outside of you. You are simply only dependent upon God. Now, nothing else can control you. Nothing else can manipulate you. Nothing else can change you. Nothing else. You are free. You're free. So what many of us look to as a fearful thing is actually one of the best things that ever happened to us.
Mm-hmm. True. And like you said as well, having the attitude of how good it is that we got to have that thing for such a long time. That's also a good attitude to have.
Yeah.
Dr. Sandoval, what lifestyle habits do you suggest then for mental health, whether that be exercise or diet?
Right. So if we look at things in the reverse, if we look at the impact of the body on the mind, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
the mind is a component of two things. It's the brain and it's the spirit. Right? We were created, Genesis 2 and verse 7. Right? God formed man out of the dust of the ground, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. So the soul is the individual, and it's made up of two components: the spirit and the body. And the brain and the spirit combination together is the mind. And so there's the spiritual components of it, thinking and love and other things of that nature that then through the mind impact the body. But then there's the physical components from the body that are involved in supporting the hardware of that computer that is necessary as well. And so obviously there's various different acronyms that are out there. One of the ones that we use is Stand for Wellness, and that is water, exercise, living temperately, love, um, nutrition, environment, which includes sunshine, thought life, uh, air, nature, getting out of nature, and one's dress. And then your wellness ends up with sufficient rest and simple trust in God. Right? But when it comes to mental health specifically, all of those are going to have a part to play in mental health. But from a research standpoint, it looks like exercise is probably huge on the list. There's research that shows that exercise is at least as good as, if not better, than any antidepressant or any anti-anxiety medication that you can take. So exercising sufficiently and repetitively is going to be something that's going to be beneficial from a mental health standpoint. We do know that there are a lot of nutritional factors that play into that as well. And so if you're adding to the body that which it doesn't need, or you're depriving the body of that which it does need, then that is going to be a problem. And so, everything that you need for health and for mental health was in the first 7 days of creation. Everything that you need for health or mental health was in the first 7 days of creation. And
Yeah.
and so if it came outside of that first 7 days of creation, it's not something that you need actually for health. So there wasn't a river of Dr. Pepper. So if you're consuming Dr. Pepper, it's not something that you need. And so you're going to be adding something in addition to the system that you don't need, and that's going to have an effect on health. And if the health is not doing well, then it's difficult for you to be able to think well and commune with God, right? Um, but if you deprive yourself of those things that were given to us in the first 7 days of creation, like fruits and nuts and seeds and whole grains and so on, as part of the initial diet, then the essential components that you need from that is going to be missing. And you get yourself farther and farther from the garden itself, and the soil bacteria and whatever, then you end up with B vitamin deficiencies. If you withdraw yourself from the sunshine, then you have vitamin D deficiencies and so on, and then you end up with problems from that standpoint. So nutrition, exercise are huge, but rest is also a big one too. You can drive a lot of problems by not getting enough sleep. But when you don't get enough sleep, it's because of the mental health problems that are going on. In the vast majority of cases, you're overthinking things, you're trying to control them, you're trying to figure out how to make things successful. So you have difficulty getting to sleep. You wake up at night and you can't get back to sleep because all this stuff is running through your head. And again, you're trying
Mm-hmm.
to it, you're trying to control it, and or you're working late into the night, and that's a mind issue as well. I have to control this. I have to get this done at a certain time, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. And when you mentioned, looking at things from creation point of view, what comes to mind is pets. So then, is that also necessary for good mental health, would you say?
Well, yes, there's actually a lot of benefit associated with taking care of animals from a mental health standpoint. There are, through the years and sin and its degradation, all that kind of stuff, there are a number of issues that can go along with animal ownership in regards to allergies or in regards to health challenges and so on, and some zoonotic infections and whatever. But but in general, taking care of animals is a good thing as far as mental health is concerned, because now it makes you um, somewhat come out of your selfishness, and you've got to take care of something else. Plus,
Mhm.
there's the enjoyment of that association and being able to care for other things. And yes, God gave us the care of animals at the beginning, and that care of animals is going to continue even in heaven, we believe, and on the new earth, and so that's something that um, I think would be a good component of mental health.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for that. And you touched a little bit on addictions as well, Dr. Sandoval. Can you talk a little bit more about like what practical tips would you suggest for someone suffering with addictions, whether it's substance or just games?
Yes, every addiction has a cause, and the root cause of addictions is always a lack of love. That is what goes behind
Mhm.
every addiction. For everything that you lack, there is a sensation, a negative sensation that goes along with that lack. So if you lack oxygen, you feel suffocation. If you lack food, you feel hunger. If you lack water, you feel thirst, and so on. So if you lack love, there's a sensation that goes along with it. Now, there's many different components of love, and so if you're missing certain components, there's loneliness. If you miss other components, there's rejection. If you miss other components, then there's resentment. If you miss other components, then there's guilt. If there's, and so there's these various different manifestations. And with these manifestations of a lack of love, then there's an emptiness, there's a void that's there. And then you come across a behavior or a substance that numbs it. It causes a dopamine response in the brain. You get kind of a euphoria associated with it. And while you have that dopamine response and that euphoria, you're not feeling the pain of the emptiness of the lack of love. And
Mm.
so then you're driven back to go and use that thing or do that thing again because you get some relief temporarily. But if you're hungry and you eat styrofoam, it's not going to help you. If you are
Mhm.
suffocating and you breathe helium, that's not going to help you either. So the underlying problem is not going to be fixed. Plus, when you fill the need with something that you don't, when you try to supply the need with something that doesn't fulfill the need, then that leads to guilt as well. And then guilt, as with Adam and Eve, causes you to separate from God, and God is the only source of the love that you need. And so the only way that you're going to overcome the addiction is by fulfilling the need for love. And in order to do that, you have to go to God in order to take the love that you need, that you might be full. And so then there has to be the solution of the guilt, right? Does
Yeah.
God love you? Yes, He does. Does He reject you because you have, done this? No, He doesn't. He knew all of your life before you were ever born. He loves you. He favors you. He thinks good of you, and so on. Knowing everything your life would ever be, every time that you would ever give in to your addiction, every time that you would ever fail, He knows it all beforehand. He paid the price for all of it on the cross before you ever committed the first sin, because all of your life was in the future at that time. And he's aware of it. And it's not like he's going, "Oh man, I can't believe they did that again." Zap, No, God's not doing it that way. He knew that you would fall. He made provision to get you through it. He is still keeping you alive, and his ability to save you is full and free. And so come back to God, accept his forgiveness, just like the woman who was caught in the midst of adultery. He said, "Neither do I
Mm.
condemn you, go and sin no more." And so accept that forgiveness and his grace for you in the midst of it. Don't beat yourself up. You don't have to beat yourself up. He died so that you don't have to beat yourself up. He was the one that was beat up. Let him be the one that was beat up. Accept that gift on your behalf and let him set you free. And accept his love for you, not because you deserve it, but because you need it. And that's who he is and what he's like. And that's the foundation of then resolving addictions. Of course, there's other components to it of accountability and separating yourself, recognizing that you can't do it, asking God to do for you what you can't do for yourself. Then, Lord, now that you're setting me free, what do you need me to do to cooperate with you right now, right? And following Him in the moment by moment. And then whatever He shows you, do it, trusting that He'll give you the power to do it. And so that can bring about a huge transformation in the life of the individual. It's by his promises, by his power, by his goodness, by his love that he sets you free, not by your efforts. But while he's setting you free, you have the privilege of cooperating with him in that process so that you're working together. And that
Mm-hmm.
works, and that's when freedom comes in the addictions.
Yeah, really good. And when you said that, Dr. Sandoval, what came to mind, it's just amazing. Like this morning, my daughter has um, a bad habit that she does, and we tell her off. And this morning, she's 5.5. Yeah, she mentioned that she still does it. And I said, "Why do you do it?" And she says, "Because I want you to kiss me." And that's just so interesting that she would say that. And like, yeah, you're right about that, that it is like the foundation is the lack of love. And yeah,
Mhm. Yeah.
it is amazing. So we have time for just one last question. And can we address this one as well? It says how to help someone with paranoid issue who is fearful, scared, anxious, feel like everybody isn't who they seem and people out to get them.
Um, is as long as an individual can be reasoned with, if they have the capacity of reason, then you can work with them from that standpoint. Some individuals have a paranoia that's associated with like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, where they
Mm-hmm.
get into a place where they're in a delusional state and there's no really capacity for them to reason. If that's the case, then there's there's other intervention that's needed in regards to that. But as long as they can reason and they can think through processes and they can draw connections between cause and effect, then you can work with them from that standpoint. On our YouTube, I mean, on our website at npmen.org, there's a section for videos, and there's the link for it below npmen.org. There's a section for videos, and there's one of the videos that's about from anxiety to peace, and that's a whole presentation about how to understand anxiety, and from a biblical standpoint, how can you understand how to come free from that anxiety and find peace? And so I'd recommend that you go there since we only have like 0 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Very good. And yeah, so just a quick question, Dr. Sandoval. What do you say about gardening? How does that help with mental health?
Sorry, repeat the question.
Sorry, gardening,
Oh
working
yeah.
in the garden.
Yeah, gardening is excellent because you get multiple things together. You have exercise, you have fresh air, you have sunshine, you have productive. So purpose, there's purpose to it, which is very important. People don't live for the sake of living. People live for the sake of purpose. They live for the sake of love. And so gardening would be an excellent activity for individuals with mental health challenges. Probably one of the best forms of exercise that you could use.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Thank you very much for that. We were truly blessed, Dr. Sandoval. We want to thank you, and we want to thank everyone as well for joining. We obviously have another presentation, the rest of the session, and your personal testimony as well tomorrow. Same time again. And we encourage everyone to share this presentation with those who they think will benefit from it. And and obviously we encourage them to visit your website that we saw at the bottom there. If we can ask you to close with a word of prayer, please.
Sure, I'd be happy. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your blessings and your great goodness to us. And Lord, we need help, and you are the great helper. But you're not just the great helper, you're the Savior. It's not that we need to do all of this and go this far and then you would take us the rest of the way. No, you are the one that has all of the good that we don't have. We don't have any. And so we are completely dependent upon you. And Lord, so teach us how to depend upon you, teach us how to cooperate with you, and show us the way to that freedom. And may we come to you and take everything that we need. May we come and take the love and the respect and the honor and all of the acceptance and belonging and harmony and security and righteousness and truth and justice and mercy and everything that we need. And may we come and just fill with you, and then freely give it away to others, and to be free from others and to live in that truth that we are a child of God. And by your grace, have that new identity rather than the old one that I think that I am God. And in so doing, experience all the health that you desired for us to have. And we pray this, thanking you for doing so. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much again, Dr. Sandoval. God bless you and your ministry. Yes, we're looking forward to seeing you and everyone else tomorrow at 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time.
Looking forward to it.
Okay. See you all. Bye.